Friends, indeed, we are continuing on a journey together, exploring, celebrating, learning from our congregation's 200-year history. Indeed, also seeking to learn from that ancient history of our ancestors in the faith. So we are with Jacob, continuing on the journey with Jacob. He has left Laban, right? We talked last week about him getting all those babies from those 4 amazing, wonderful, too often overlooked women to build the nation of Israel. But he wasn't Israel yet, right? Today, we get that story. After 20 years of living with his relative and acquiring much, Jacob started heading back home. He went back home to where he was the grabber of the heel. Remember, he was born a twin and held on to his brother Esau's heel, coming out second. So maybe he was already a wrestler, perhaps wrestling with his brother in the womb, according to this story. But again, he pulls out his wrestling abilities. Now, if I were in Iowa, maybe I'd delve more into that, because some of you know I'm an Iowa native, and wrestling is huge in Iowa, but we're in Indiana, and Indiana is more of a basketball state, right? So we'll just leave that aside. But here Jacob strives with God, wrestles with God, struggles with God. And on the other side of that struggling, on the other side of that challenge, he comes out marked. He comes out changed. And this calls for a new name. One who strives with God, one who fights with God, one who contends with God, one who struggles with God. And if we know the story of Israel, if you keep reading past Genesis, it's not only here that Israel is understood to struggle with God, but throughout their history, Israel seems to be in a struggle with the divine, struggling with God, perhaps as God seeming to be the oppositional force at times. Struggling with God as God being with them through the struggle, through the challenges that they face. This name marks this nation, and this story, I believe, was a way that our ancestors sought to make sense. Why are we called Israel? What does our name mean? Where does it come from? So, of course, it lends itself well for us to consider that part of our history, our 200-year history. Because, again, when our 200 years started, First Baptist Church is what was in existence. We are no longer First Baptist Church, as I shared with the children, because that is only a part of our heritage, a part of our history. In 1960, I know we had to travel a long way, but in 1960, Carl Schreer was called to serve a university community, a campus ministry at Indiana University. And that grew that ministry into what would become a church, Christ United Church, in 1961. This was of the United Church of Christ lineage, denomination, that had recently formed. And they were thriving. They were graduate students, undergrad students, and they were in a house on IU's campus doing their thing, engaging in ministry. But as the years went on, Reverend Schreer was called to another position, and they found themselves in a particularly challenging situation because the university wanted the house back. This happens sometimes with universities, right? They want their space, they want to grow it in a particular way. So Christ United Church was without a home. But this congregation, this building, had been established recently, right? In the late 50s, First Baptist started worshiping here, in this place. So Reverend Ray, who was serving the church at that time, invited the congregation to come and worship in the chapel. Some of you have been in the chapel space. It's lovely. It's a wonderful space. And if you haven't been, I invite you to go in there sometime. It is very thought-provoking and reflective. And they worshiped, and they gathered in that space, and they were a community, but they didn't stay separate. They didn't stay in their own separate spaces because they soon joined, and the story that I hear is that First Baptist had a lot of adults, a little bit on the aging a little bit, who could teach young children. And Christ United Church had a number of young children, thinking about the age, right? They were college, undergrad, or graduate students, so perhaps we're having some families growing at that time. They had plenty of children to be engaged with in faith formation. So they joined their educational programs almost immediately. But Christ United Church wanted to keep going, keep doing their thing, so they called another pastor, Nevin Danner, was called as pastor of Christ United Church, still gathering within the chapel. And as some of us know, some of you know, Reverend Ray retired at that time and shortly after died, and a new minister was called to First Baptist Church. A.E. Lacey followed Reverend Ray. And when he was getting there were some conversations going about a merger. One might think that merger would have been with Christ United Church, right? They're right there in the chapel. Of course it makes sense. As some decline was being felt, some decline was being seen across the church, but certainly at First Baptist Church after Reverend Ray had left. But nope, it wasn't with the easy answer. It was with First Presbyterian downtown. Some of you know First Presbyterian, yeah? They were having some conversations saying, hey, maybe we should join together. And a vote was taken in each space, in each house of worship. And the vote passed. Well, halfway, right? You have to get up to the 2/3 vote. The vote passed by the Presbyterians, but it didn't pass First Baptist. I think it was 8 votes at that time. It didn't quite meet the 2/3 threshold. So they said, okay, well, we're pretty close. Let's do it again. Let's give people a couple of months to think about this. They did it. They got back together, had a vote, and First Baptist Church passed it. But First Presbyterian did not. By 11 votes this time. So I don't know, there must have been some conversation happening, but it didn't go through. And Christ United Church had continued on with their ministry, but they were, I think, coming to the realization that perhaps they would not be a standalone congregation. So they were ready to join. And First Baptist had already passed joining with First Presbyterian, and they lived all the way down in the center of town. Christ United Church was right here. So seamlessly, in 1972, started having conversations about joining together and officially becoming one congregation. And in 1973, the vote was passed, the Constitution was changed, and so was the name to that ridiculously long name that I shared with the kids, First Baptist Church, United Church of Christ. Sometimes I say that, and I'll be talking with Sarah, and she says, yeah, try to say that 5 times fast. Yeah. It only took this congregation 30 years, I guess, to get tired of stumbling over saying that name, or perhaps enough people thinking we really are something different. Yes, we are a part of the American Baptist Church, and we are part of the United Church of Christ, but we are something else in ourselves as well. How can we move forward to more fully express who we are as a congregation? It doesn't hurt that the building was falling apart and that new signs were being needed. So it also seemed like a good time to just stop, take a breath, and have a centering moment, right? When everything is falling down around you and you're trying to build it back up, who are we building this up to be? How have we changed over the past 30 years since coming together? And it didn't hurt that we had just gone through a situation of being kicked out of our region, our American Baptist region, our local American Baptist region from Bedford, and not accepted by the Indianapolis-based region. So some of the people were feeling a little, I don't know, squiggly, wiggly about the Baptist name. That continues sometimes to be associated with a theology, a sort of community that doesn't quite fit who we are. So Baptist was lost or removed from the official name, but not lost within this community. We continue to be American Baptist. We continue to be strongly independent, wouldn't you say? We continue to hold on to those ideals, even the ideals of the separation of church and state. We continue to hold on to the autonomy of each local congregation, which is similar to what is there in the United Church of Christ. And we hold on to, and we have been living out even more fully, and even at that time of the shift, an identity for progressive social justice at our core, theologically and socially. So First United Church we became 22 years ago. Changed, different, marked by the struggle with God, sometimes again, perhaps wrestling against God, it might seem, or wrestling against others within the church, at least, and others within the church, because with those changes, sometimes people leave, right? Sometimes people really want Baptist in their name, and they go elsewhere because it's not there anymore. And sometimes becoming clearer about who you are and what you're about, becoming more of yourself, claiming our identity, draws people to you. People who haven't heard that welcoming message in a church. People who might start questioning, well, what's a united church? I was at Pride a couple of years ago, and First United Church, we have our banner up, and somebody came up and said, well, so what's a united church? Is it Methodist? Is it Lutheran? Not really. We belong to two different denominations, and both of those understand that we are who we are, and we are called to make the faith our own where we are in our time and in our place. Friends, our names, they speak about who we are. are indeed First United Church because we are united. We do come from two different denominations, at least originally. But how many of you started out as Baptist? Okay? How many of you started out as United Church of Christ? How many of you started out as something else? Yeah, we are united because we don't all have to think the same. Unity does not mean conformity. Unity means that we are committed to being in community with each other. You heard it, you sang it. We are a community of love and acceptance. That is who we are. And we seek to be first. We seek to push the envelope, to move, to challenge the status quo. Even how this building is situated is supposed to be a sign and a symbol of that because it doesn't sit perpendicular or parallel to the roads. It is a little bit at an angle. We were kind of, I guess, maybe the first to move out of downtown. But we seek to be pushing that boundary as well. And indeed, we are church. And again, as I told the children, it's not about the building. Am I glad? Am I grateful to have this building? Yes, I am. Am I glad that our ancestors who came before us, when they saw the building falling apart, decided to invest sometimes their sweat equity put into putting in the tiling in this new space? Yes, I am, but also to even selling off some of the land that was here to be able to pay for the renovations that needed to be taking place for us to be able to gather here, and all that has come since. I am very grateful to have this space. But I am more grateful to have you here because indeed you are the church. That is what the church is about. The church is the people. So, did we get some suggestions from the children about what we could rename ourselves? Yes, we did. But thinking through that, considering, does this name still fit? My conclusion would be, yeah, we are indeed First United Church. All of those things, none of them needing to be left off. I have 4 names. I have a hyphenated last name. I have a much longer name than our congregation. I don't think that's too long, but you know, sometimes children have short attention spans. First United Church is who we are. That's who we are when we are gathered here. That's who we are when we are encountering the face of God as Jacob, now Israel. And it is who we are as we will move forward. Every day forward, Jacob was Israel. Jacob struggled with God. God was with Jacob in the struggle. Every day forward, God goes with us, and we go forward together, united. As this church, striving to move that needle toward justice, towards kindness, towards joy and beauty. So friends, that's some of what I have been considering as I've encountered this text again, very well known to some of you, as I've been considering this piece of our history. As we have become who we are, and considering, that now is the question. Considering how do we continue to live into that name? How do we continue to live out of that name? As we move forward for the next, we've been First United Church for 22 years now, for the next 22 years, for the next 200 years, for the next 2 days, 2 hours. How about let's narrow that down? How are we invited, friends, to continue on our journey as this community of faith, as First United Church. I'll give you a moment to reflect, to consider, to pray. Friends, let us be together now for a moment of pause.